A very good morning. Today is 6/7/2020. There are 4 articles of Hindu Editorial. The first article is regarding the Enrica Lexie, that is the killing of 2 Indian fishermen by the Italy, which has achieved its objective in Enrica Lexie matter. The second article is on Re-enfranchise the forgotten voter, that is, there must be a political will to assure the one nation, one voter card to ensure the ballot portability. And the third article is on Modi's left visit and the message to India. Final article is on slowing down on COVID-19 vaccine. There is an urgent need for vaccine against COVID-19, but it cannot be hastened into being. If you're first to my channel, I request you all to subscribe to my channel, Wifi Study Karo. I am Prashant. I welcome you all to Wifi Study Karo. The cartoon of the day clearly says that Rahul Gandhi is at backstage, and Rahul Gandhi is still behind the key of Congress decisions, and the fortune on the palm's hand have not changed. First article is on killing of 2 Indian fishermen. Italy has achieved its basic objective of Enrica Lexie St. Anthony matter. Although the story saga, it wanted its marine Massimiliano Lautaro and Flavio Gironi to stand trial for killing the 2 Indian fishermen, not in India but in Italy. The Marines were part of security contingents of Enrica Lexie as an Italian commercial oil tanker, while Pink and Valentine were on the Indian fishing boat St. Anthony. The incident took place on February 15, 2012 in India's contagious zone, that is 20.5 nautical miles off the Kerala. The operative part of Annex, that is 6 arbitral tribunal decision made by public last week on July 2, 2020 gave Italy full satisfaction on its crucial point, although in the split verdict of 3-2 on a shaky grounds. The tribunal, established by the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea (ITLOS) under the provisions of United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea, that is UNCLOS, held that the Marines were entitled to immunity in relation to the acts that are committed during the incident on February 15, 2012, and that India is precluded from exercising its jurisdiction over the Marines. India has opposed Italy's request for arbitral tribunal by the ITLOS rule in Italy's favor. The ITLOS had asked both countries to suspend all court proceedings and refrain from initiating new ones that may aggravate the dispute or prevent the implementation of tribunal decisions. According to the judicial proceeding against the Italian Marines in the India were suspended in May 2016, the Supreme Court had allowed Indian Gironi, who was on bail in India, to return to Italy pending the decision of the tribunal. Lautaro was already there because of medical reasons. Italy now continues to case with its case had registered against Lautaro and Gironi, the duo. It is highly unlikely, though, that any Italian court will convict Lautaro or Gironi for Pink and Valentine's unjustified killing. The reported humanitarian assistance that the Italian authorities gave their families can never be taken for justice for the lives snuffed out by the 2 trigger-happy members of the Italian armed forces, who without any justification considered the fishing boat to be a pirate skiff. Only the operative portion of the tribunal's award is available till now. The detailed award is being scrutinized by India and Italy for the redactions of those portions. Either countries feel confidential and therefore cannot be publicly disclosed. Besides the tribunal's hearing, except for the opening of statement, the 2 countries' agents was held confidentially. It is unlikely that the Italy would allow facts prejudicial to its versions to be made open. The legal points on the jurisdiction of the 2 countries try to the marine and the immunity issue should become available hopefully somewhat soon. They would enable a full assessment to be made of the reasoning adopted by the majority to reach its conclusions on these important issues. The Ministry of External Affairs, a statement of the awards, notes that the tribunal offered or observed that the India and Italy had a concurrent jurisdictions over the incident and valid legal basis of the institute criminal proceedings against the Marines. A prima facie that the tribunal should be allowed the case to continue in India, for the victims were Indians, and the Enrica Lexie came voluntarily to India, and after investigation a case was lodged against Lottery and Gironi. It is noteworthy that the tribunal did not accept the Italy's charge that India brought the Italian oil tanker by ruse to Kochi. Clearly, how the tribunal majority found a way to ensure that the case should continue in Italy by agreeing with Italian a plea that the Marine had immunity for they were the state officials. A dangerous precedent that India stands at that the UNCLOS is not concerned with the issues relating to immunity was strong. Immunity of the state officials have to be governed by the specific multilateral and bilateral treaties or agreements. It should also be tangentially brought into the settled issue of jurisdiction. Besides, even if Italian Marines are considered as state officials, they are to be deployed an Italian commercial vessel. Italy did not so unilaterally without the cover of any multilateral or bilateral agreement. There is no convention that such persons as Marines in such cases are immune from the local criminal jurisdiction. Only heads of states, heads of governments and foreign ministers customarily enjoy the immunity, a broad part of the accredited diplomats who are covered in the Vienna Convention. Thus, the tribunal's decision on the Marines' immunity sets a dangerous precedent. Countries may now be tempted to enact a specific laws to give immunity to their military and paramilitary personnel and other by declaring them state officials, and thereafter place them on the different kinds of commercial craft and use them as adventurous purposes. And New Delhi must be focused. India can take satisfaction that the tribunal found that by firing St. Antony, Italy was guilty of violating India's freedom and right of navigation. Consequently, it held India is entitled to payment of compensation in connection with the loss of physical life harm, material damage to the property of a moral harm perpetrated by the Italy. Now it is incumbent on the government to ensure that Italy is made to pay full of the losses for the life and suffering and it has caused. In this manner, any lapses in the count will be inexcusable. Considerations of the good relations with the Italy and the European Union, which had stood beside Italy throughout this matter, should not be allowed to influence these specific negotiations. From the executive and judiciary, this is also the time from executive and judicial branches of the India state to introspect on how they have handled the whole affair politically, diplomatically and legally. A number of questions also arises. Some of them are, was it prudent to appoint the National Investigation Agency to handle the case after the Supreme Court had ordered a special court for the setup to try the Marines? Should virtually terrorism had been leveled against the Marines only to drop later? Should also the Supreme Court not decide the jurisdiction and immunity issues instead of leaving them to open? Should not have this been found to counter Italy, causing deliberate delays to thwart the trail from commencing? Especially important for it to be used that these delays to build sympathy from the Marines in US. This is regarding India must not cast anchor on Enrica Lexie. The next article is on Re-enfranchise, the forgotten voter. In response to COVID-19 pandemic, the Election Commission of India had made it possible that the senior citizens above the age of 65 years to be voted on a postal ballot, and given that there is a great risk of exposure for the novel coronavirus. Hitherto, this option was available only for the disabled citizens, those who are above 80 years. However, postal ballots may not minimize the risk of infection, and it may not be better instead to provide separate voting booths for senior citizens. Migrants and margins. A well thought out initiatives that facilitate voting and remove the obstacles to the voters exercising their franchise must be welcomed. We would urge that same empowering approach be extended to another group which faces enormous difficulties in exercising its franchise. The novel coronavirus catalysm and the subsequent national lockdown brought to center stage that the magnitude of internal migration hardships that migrant workers endure on the quest for their livelihoods. The stark indignity that may have endured their long march home suggests that they perceived as being politically powerless. Internal migrants constitute about 13.9 crore as the economic survey of 2017, that is nearly a third of the India's labour force. They travel across the India in search of economic livelihood and in construction sector, domestic work, bricklines, mines, transportation, security, agriculture, etc. Many never intend to settle down and wish to return to their native villages and towns once their work is completed or working session ends. Often they toil in exploitation, low-wage jobs lacking in identity and proper living conditions without access to welfare and unable to exercise their voting rights. Migrant workers become quasi-disenfranchised, forgotten voters because they cannot afford to return home on election day to choose their representatives. The callous attitude towards the plight of migrants exhibited by some state governments lead to a vote of the conclusion that the group does not constitute to the voter bank worthy of attention. Internal migrant workers do not enroll as the voters in their place of employment since they found approved residence hard to provide. Many are seasonal migrants who rather vote in their villages if they could afford to return home. Taking the task before Election Commission of India, ensuring that every Indian who is eligible to vote can do some must be a central mission of ECI. It is a matter of pride that India currently had a 91% crore registered voters in 2019 general elections, and it records 67.4%, that is 61.36 voters cast the vote. The ECI would also tell to focus attention on the third, that is a substantial 29.68 crore which did not cast their vote. National Election Study surveys that it has shown that about 10% of registered voters refrain from voting due to the lack of interest in politics. That leaves approximately 20 crore voters who want to vote but unable to do so. On these, there are about 3 non-residents that Indians, that is NRIs. Only about 1 lakh NRIs have registered to vote presently because voting requires a physical presence in India. One of them, about 25,000, voted in 2019 elections to enable NRIs to exercise their franchise. The government brought in legislation the previous Lok Sabha to enable voting through authorized proxies. While the legislation lapsed, it is interesting to contrast the concern of NRI and the lack of for the poor migrant workers. Yes, there is a model. Does our system enable any form of voter portability that can serve as a model for re-enfranchising migrant workers? The answer to this question is yes. Service voters, that is government employees posted away from the home, can vote through electronically transmitted postal ballot system (ETBBS). Classified several voters, example military personnel, can do so by their proxies. The ECA had also decided in testing an Aadhaar-linked voter ID based solution to enable electors to cast their votes digitally from anywhere in India. It will be some time in future before this becomes a functional reality. While developing this solution, we must ensure that the linkage with Aadhaar does not result in expulsion of eligible individuals. To facilitate voting by the migrant workers, the ECI could undertake a substantial outreach measures with a network of district collectorates. A migrant should be able to physically vote in the city of work based on the addresses on the existing voter ID and a duration of the temporary stay. In the age where banking transactions have gone online seamlessly, it is also technologically feasible to record and transfer votes to their respective constituencies without compromising on credibility of the election process. The COVID-19 crisis mobilized government and non-government organizations to set up a register and portals to reach out the migrant workers. A one nation, one ration card is being assured to enable migrant workers and their families members to access public distribution system benefits from airfare price shops in the country. Similarly, voting must be viewed not as a civic duty but as a civic right. We must also demonstrate the political will to assure one nation, one voter card to ensure the nation native of ballot portability and empower the forgotten migrant voter. Once migrant voters get into exercise their franchise, we can expect that there will be a change in how they are treated. A quote attributed by Thomas Jefferson goes this way: "We do not have government by the majority, we have government by the majority who participate." Ensuring that every Indian voter can participate in election is imperative to ensure the democratically inclusive in India. This is regarding the refranchising the forgotten voter to reinforce their franchise right. The next article is on Modi's message about a left visit. With his visit to Nimmo near Leh, which houses of 15 crops headquarters including the base hospital, Prime Minister Modi accomplished several objectives. He visited soldiers, including those who were injured in Galwan Valley clash on June 15th, addressed the troops involved in the standoff with China, and briefed directly by senior officers involved in operational preparedness, who also conducting military trials and talks with China People Liberation's Army. In the speech to soldiers in Nimmo, he addressed different audiences as well, with the biggest message for Chinese leadership, where he said that the age of expansionism is over, calling that the era of evolution or development. Mr. Modi also said that era of colonial expansion is over. He said that in the past, expansionist forces have done great harm to humanity and had been erased or forced to relent. The message to Beijing was it must not engage in territorial aggression across the boundaries with countries from Central Asia to South China Asia, including India, and it must also to recall its own anger against imperialism that so many of the PRC's leadership have decided. Despite the fact that he did not once name China, the message appeared to have hit home, with the Chinese embassy in Delhi issuing the denial that it had made any expansion moves. The Prime Minister also addressed that other countries they are viewing the growing seriousness of the 2-month-long standoff with concern, as he spoke about India's tradition of peace with bravery, indicating that the diplomatic options will be exhausted before any action. To his domestic audience, the address signified that the government's determination to face the challenge at the line of actual control and the focus on national priorities of infrastructure and economic development. Finally, he also addressed the soldiers themselves as he spoke the value of man who had been engaged in the clashes of the line of actual control, including the Galwan confrontation with the 20 Indian soldiers were killed. In all the three aspects of the addresses, the speech which welcomed and its unspoken message should be also studied closely. While the Prime Minister's decision to visit troops near the line of actual control and well-timed and apt, it is also raised the temperature of India-China engagement and indicates that the military talks for disengagement and the dispersal of the massive mobilization of the troops on both sides have not made much progress. The contrast in his tone from just 2 weeks ago, when he reassured the nation that neither has anyone transgressed nor anyone inside Indian territory, indicates that the situation is far serious than it was previously understood. It is also hoped that the government, which has thus far not given the nation a full picture on what had happened and what nation needs to prepare for it, will do so now, further clarifying the Prime Minister's core message at this is regarding the message by the Modi after he visited the Galwan Valley. The next article is on COVID-19 vaccine. Yet again, the pandemic had revealed cracks in the conduct of Indian Council of Medical Research, that is ICMR. A letter by the agency's head, Dr. Balram Bhargav, to doctors last week preparing to test a vaccine for human trials appeared to be coercing them into getting a vaccine ready by August 15th. After a public row, the agency clarified that its intent was to infuse a sense of urgency given the pandemic and that there were no plans to deviate from the rule book of vaccine development. However, there was no rationally extended for why this date August 15th cropped up. Given the crisis at hand, regularity of agencies that would have relaxed rules on drug testing and vaccine trials. While scientific rigor cannot be compromised, there is a move globally to allow more leeway to formulations that show some promise and also allow them to market under the medical guidance. This is why drugs should be such as Favipiravir, Remdesivir, despite limited evidence of success, have made it to the besides of patients. Vaccines are entirely different game. The basic psychology of all vaccines involves introducing fragments, in some cases the whole virus, albeit in a weekend, from its healthy volunteers. Therefore, the first checkpoint is that vaccine candidate should not be taken of the healthy person, and the second hurdle is that vaccine must stimulate an immune system just enough to get the produce protective antibodies. In other words, it must be efficacious. And finally, only one they should be go well. It must be tested in several thousand people in real world conditions, and they must be shown over time to better protected than those who were unvaccinated. Each one of these steps cannot be the vaccine that can be released for public use. The Hyderabad-based Bharat Biotech, the maker of Covaxin, had experienced a credibility in a vaccine manufacture. Covaxin is developed from the strain of SARS-CoV-2 isolated in NIV. However, this only makes it one of the hundreds of potential vaccines being tested, and consensus of the expert is that no vaccine can be readied until the next year. This is now largely understood by most, and hence the behavioral changes and social distancing and an instant of wearing mask in public. It is therefore perplexing why ICMR, with its panoply of eminences, would want to cut corners with the basic premise of research that science does not progress in hurry. The pandemic has also brought in focus the unavoidable role of uncertainty. New aspects of the disease are being brought to light, sometimes every day. The best strategy in the midst of such a flux is that to maintain absolute transparency and proceed securely, even if it is slowly. This is regarding the urgent need for the vaccine against COVID-19, but it cannot be hastened into being, says this article, how COVID-19 vaccine should not be in a hurry. That's the end of article discussion. If you are first to my channel, I request you all to subscribe to my channel Wifi se Study Karo, same Insta page Wifi se Study Karo, and also Facebook link. If you are first to my channel, I do job updates, interesting facts, technical glitches, and daily editorials. Please do subscribe, you will be benefited from this. Thank you, have a great time.